Morning. We are on the record. This is the evidentiary hearing in the matter of the investigation of Aristotle Unified Communications, LLC, related to the Connect America Fund Phase 2 auction. I am Ron Pridgeon. I am the regulatory law judge assigned to preside over this hearing. It's being held December 12th, 2023 in the Governor Office Building in Jefferson City, Missouri. The time is 9 a.m. I would like to get entries of appearance from counsel, beginning with staff, please.
Whitney Scurlock on behalf of the staff of the Missouri Public Service Commission.
Ms. Scurlock, thank you. On behalf of Aristotle Unified Communications, please.
Thank you, Judge. Appearing for Aristotle, Carl Lumley of the Curtis, Hines, Garrett, and O'Keefe Law Firm.
Mr. Lumley, thank you. I don't believe I see any other counsel in the room for any other party, such as OPC, but let me double check. Anyone else wishing to enter an appearance? All right, hearing none, normally begin with opening statements, and I would like to begin with staff, but is there anything else from counsel or from the bench before we proceed to opening statements?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Ms. Scurlock, when you're ready.
May it please the Commission. This may be the first time this particular issue has come before this Commission. Certainly, it is a bit unusual. Aristotle has tried to boil this case down to only a question of whether or not it is appropriate for this Commission to certify Aristotle under provision 54.314. It has also tried to justify the fact that it has not made any contributions to Missouri citizens by saying that it was not awarded a large enough service area. However, the fact is that Aristotle was awarded this service area in 2018, and starting in July of 2019, began receiving installments of that federal funding. It has received over $1.3 million to date. If Aristotle knew that it could not provide service to the 788 locations it was awarded, then it should have taken action to transfer its obligations immediately. Instead, we are now here in 2023, and Aristotle still has not successfully transferred its interests. The Connect America Fund Phase 2 auction was intended to award federal funding to companies that could provide internet service to high-cost areas of the U.S. High-cost areas are those for which it is more expensive to build out broadband service when compared with the average cost in unserved areas. It was a reverse auction, which means that lower bids were considered preferable to provide the requested broadband services. There were also tiers of service that were weighted along with the bids to determine the winners. Ultimately, 103 bidders won $1.49 billion to be paid out over the course of 10 years to provide fixed broadband and voice services to over 700,000 locations in 45 states. Winning bidders are required to hit benchmarks over the course of 6 years in order to continue receiving their funding. By the end of this year, Aristotle is required to be able to provide service to 60% or more of its service areas. Aristotle reported to the Universal Service Administrative Corporation that oversees the funding that it hit the December 31st, 2022 benchmark to provide service to 40% of its service area. It reported that it hit that benchmark on December 31st of 2022. Staff saw no evidence of the service prior to Aristotle's report, and the company did not update its website to state that it was able to provide service until this summer of 2023. In fact, from staff's investigation, it is learned that Aristotle's ability to provide service has no association with Aristotle at all, but rather comes from the use of existing service that's provided by 2 other companies. If these other companies can provide service to the areas, then what good is the $1.3 million that was given to Aristotle already? The company has openly admitted that it is not serving broadband to a single Missouri customer, nor has it installed a single piece of equipment in the state of Missouri. Additionally, Aristotle is not advertising to Missouri's customers using any method other than relying on customers in other states to tell Missouri citizens about their services. But Aristotle did not provide evidence that it is even facilitating what it calls this word-of-mouth advertising method. Federal Provision 54.314 asks state commissions to attest to the Federal Communications Commission that eligible telecommunications carriers used all federal funding provided to them for the current year and will use the funding for the next year for the provision, maintenance, and upgrading of facilities and services for which the support is intended only. Our own Court of Appeals in 2009 quoted a 10th Circuit case stating that the state must certify that a carrier is using the funding appropriately. Staff has been formally investigating the company through this docket since June and was observing the company's reports regarding its CAF II benchmarks prior to that. Staff cannot, in good faith, recommend recertification of Aristotle to receive federal funding when Aristotle has been unable to prove that the citizens of Missouri are receiving any benefits from these funds. I imagine that today Aristotle will tell you that Missouri is missing out on funding if the company is not recertified. It may also tell you that the funding will be transferred to another company for use in Missouri. Aristotle's funding will not be withheld until the new year. That means that at any point in this year of 2023, Aristotle could have transferred its interest while it was still receiving its funding. However, it has not. That if the commission recertifies Aristotle, staff has no reassurance that Aristotle will successfully transfer its interest or that the money will be used in any manner that benefits the state of Missouri. None of the equipment that Aristotle reports to have purchased is located in our state presently, and no construction work has been reported to be started by Aristotle to date. Please consider what staff has reported to you up to this point, and do not hand-wave this money based on empty promises. I encourage you to ask our witness, John Van Eschen, about his investigation and his site visits to those service areas that Aristotle has reported. Thank you.
Ms. Gerlach, thank you. Let me see if we have any bench questions. Commissioner Coleman, any questions for staff counsel?
No questions. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you. Commissioner Holzman, any questions? Hearing none. Commissioner Hahn?
No questions, Judge. Sorry.
I'm sorry, Commissioner. Thank you. Commissioner Hahn? No questions. All right, thank you. Ms. Gerlach, thank you so much. Mr. Lumley, opening when you're ready, sir.
Good morning. Again, Carl Lumley representing Aristotle this morning. I've enjoyed listening to your PSC history moments during your agenda meetings and hearing about colleagues of mine, Bill Steinmeier, Jim Fisher, and others, and practicing before the commission has always been a pleasure in my career. And it got me thinking all the way back to when I started in 1985, my first day of practice. I was helping my partner Lee Curtis represent MCI in the days of trying to create telephone competition for the first time. And this is the first time I can think of in all the cases I've handled where the commission made an adverse decision against a utility before hearing from the utility. And you know, one of the advantages of due process is decisions can be fully informed because you've heard from all sides. But the commission's hearing from the company now. And the evidence will show that the commission should change course and certify Aristotle to receive these funds. With late certification, funding has been lost. It's a pro rata loss. Once you're late from the October, it's an October 1st deadline. There's a grace period to October 5th, but once you've missed the grace period, then the funds are lost. But if we get certification as soon as possible, there still will be funds for 2024. Right now, it means over $50,000 has been lost, but we can minimize this. As the commission stated in its order designating Aristotle as an ETC, the CAF II program is part of the FCC's reform and modernization of its Universal Service Fund support programs designed to accelerate the expansion of broadband service to rural areas. The evidence will show that Aristotle was awarded CAF II support funds for Howell, Ozark, and Oregon counties in Missouri along the Missouri-Arkansas border. Aristotle's CEO, Elizabeth Bowles, has submitted pre-filed direct testimony and will be here today to testify further. She's been involved in telecommunications with Aristotle and its former parent company since 2000. She's been a licensed attorney since 1993. She was first in her class in college and law school. She was a law clerk for the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals and worked in private practice at a well-known DC telecommunications law firm prior to becoming involved with Aristotle. Elizabeth demonstrates that Aristotle has spent Missouri CAV2 support funds properly, and in fact has and will spend its own funds on top of those funds, and she'll provide further testimony on that point today. So it's not just even a matter of these support funds. They don't track with your milestones. The companies are always going to be behind, and they will never actually catch up. Companies have to spend more than the support funds. But it's the use of the support funds that's the only issue in front of the Commission today for certification under Rule 54.314. Staff confirmed this in its recommendation report, and indeed the issues list confirms this as well. Elizabeth testifies that Aristotle has been recertified in its other states of operation, Illinois, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Mississippi, for 2024. Staff asserts that Aristotle is just collecting these funds and sitting on them. That's not correct, and the evidence shows just the opposite is true, and that Aristotle should be certified to continue to receive support funds. Staff raises concerns about the CAF2 milestones, but the evidence will show that Aristotle is meeting the milestones, and further, that FCC and USAC, or USAC, are in charge of the milestones. And under the FCC's rules, if a company isn't missing the milestones, they don't forfeit support funds. The FCC can withhold portions of the support funds, not even 100%. They withhold portions of it, and then restore those funds when the company writes course and meets milestones. So even in a situation where a company is behind, which we submit is not the situation for Aristotle, but if it were, the funds would still ultimately be received once a company caught back up. So it's the punitive action is the lack of certification and permanent loss of support funding. Staff asked USAC to audit Aristotle, and that audit is underway. And Aristotle doesn't expect any issues. But again, if there were, USAC has plenty of authority to reclaim funds or do whatever it thinks is appropriate. It's, again, not an issue in front of this commission, and certainly not an issue in the case today. The evidence will show that because Aristotle won a very small set of census blocks, it determined that it would be more advantageous for Missourians, more efficient, for another company with larger award to ultimately take over these areas. And that process has dragged on much longer than Aristotle anticipated. But it's changed its course to not wastefully spend these support funds. You don't build a tower that the other company isn't going to need. I mean, these towers are expensive. The evidence will show it's $300,000 in today's money. You don't just spend that out of these support funds and then have a tower go to waste. So it tried to reposition its strategy so that when the transfer goes through, the monies continue to be spent in an appropriate way. And one impact of this delay has been on marketing. And you'll hear that Aristotle has been changing its marketing as it's found this to drag on. But again, that's not an issue in front of the commission today. Aristotle still plans to submit this transfer request. It has to do so in cooperation with the transferee, and it expects to do that. And once that application is filed, you'll hear that it's standard practice for there to be an operating agreement. So while that application is pending, the transferee can be conducting the business. Aristotle would receive the support funds but be able to transfer them to the operating company while we're waiting for FCC support. And in general, they approve these transfers. Of course, you can never guarantee anything. But even if these support funds resume during transfer, which is absolutely uncertain, we still have these loss of funds until certification occurs. And the only loser ultimately in that is the residents of these rural counties. And if the transfer weren't approved, which again we don't expect, but if it weren't, Aristotle would never recover these lost funds either. And it creates a question, that, depending on how much has been lost, of whether they could even go forward. I mean, it just day by day you're losing money, you're losing the ability to serve another customer, And that's the concern. So to best preserve these resources for the folks of these counties, Oregon, Howell, Ozark, we're asking that the commission recertify Aristotle as soon as possible. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Lumley, thank you. If you could hold on just in case we have bench questions. Commissioner Coleman, any questions for company counsel?
No questions, Judge. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Holzman, any questions?
No questions, Judge. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Hahn, any questions? All right, thank you. Mr. Lumley, thank you. Just one quick note before we move on to evidence. I just want to remind everyone, I believe Ms. Bowles attached a confidential exhibit to her testimony, and so because we have people listening not just in the room but online, if you want to discuss the contents of that confidential exhibit, please give me a heads up so we can make sure that we are in camera properly. So anything else before we proceed to evidence?
No, Your Honor.
Mrs. Gerlach, when you're ready.
Staff would call its witness, John Van Eschen, to the stand.
All right, Mr. Van Eschen, if you'll come forward to be sworn, please, sir. Do you swear the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, sir. Please have a seat. Ms. Gerlach, when you're ready.
Would you please state and spell your name for the court reporter?
My name is John Van Eschen, John, last name Van, space Eschen.
And Mr. Van Eschen, by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by the Missouri Public Service Commission. I'm the manager of the telecommunications department.
And are you the same John Van Eschen who prepared or caused to be prepared direct testimony in this case and contributed to the staff report that was filed in this case?
Yes,
And those have been marked as exhibit number 100 by staff, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Do you have any changes or corrections to make to that testimony today?
I do not.
And is it true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes,
If I were to ask you the same questions that are contained in your testimony, would your answers be substantially the same?
yes,
At this time, staff would offer Exhibit 100, which is the direct testimony of John Van Eschen, both public and confidential, into the record.
Any objections?
No objection.
Right, Exhibit 100 is admitted. Ms. Gerlach, when you're ready.
I tender this witness for cross. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lumley, any questions?
I have no questions.
All right, thank you. Let me see if we have any bench questions. Commissioner Coleman, any questions for Mr. Van Eschen?
No questions, Judge.
Thank you. Commissioner Holzman?
No questions, Judge.
Thank you. Commissioner Hahn?
I do have questions.
Thank you.
Judge. Good morning, Mr. Van Eschen.
good morning.
I do just have a few questions to help me better understand some of the testimony and exhibits that have been filed. So in reading the staff report, I think it's Exhibit C, it says at a particular point that staff asked for a copy of the signed agreement, the transfer agreement, with the company, and the company obliged but provided a copy solely signed by Aristotle. And so I did review the, an executed transfer agreement, and it does seem to have both companies' signatures on it. Can you speak to that? Because if I'm reviewing the correct document, I'm trying to figure out.
In terms of transferring the obligations from Aristotle to this other company,
Yes.
yeah, I haven't seen anything substantial that would indicate that this is something that Aristotle and the other company would need to file with the FCC, and the FCC would have a process in which to entertain that petition for a Section 214 transfer.
Okay. Mr. Van Eschen, on the Connect America funds, can you speak to if Aristotle does not receive the funds and they're retained within the FCC, what happens to those funds?
by not certifying Aristotle, their CAF 2 funding will cease January 1st. And I have tried to get some clarification from my contacts at the FCC in regards to what might happen with that funding should Aristotle be successful in a Section 214 transfer. And I was unable to get a clear, concise answer from the FCC.
Even if the transfer agreement is not executed and the funds remain within the FCC, how are Connect America funds either retained within the FCC or redistributed?
I can attest to what happens with the funds. The funding to Aristotle would cease January 1st until this commission would decide to recertify Aristotle.
Okay. My understanding was that if funds were recouped or not distributed by the FCC in the Connect America Fund auction, if they were remaining within that fund, they would be used the same way in a same reverse auction process, so that they may actually come to the state, those funds, through another reverse auction process, or they could go anywhere else in the United States.
They may. It's unclear to me. This situation that we're in is somewhat unusual, and the FCC staff admits it's unusual, but they understand the situation.
Okay. If the transfer agreement is not approved by the FCC, who has the burden of recouping the funds that have been expended, or how does that process work?
I think Aristotle is telling this commission that it plans to meet the milestones on its own. And I think at this point, Aristotle would need to convince the commission that they are serious, they have definitive plans that on how they would use the funding so that it would benefit the consumers at these 788 targeted locations.
Okay. My understanding is that Aristotle is currently being audited, and the results of that audit are not yet complete. Can you speak to that or give me any timeline for when you think that audit may be complete?
I do not. You know, when we were investigating the company and I had communicated with the FCC about the company and asked for advice, they were the ones that suggested the USAC audit. And I reached out to USAC. They started the audit immediately, and USAC has not kept me in the loop in terms of the status of their audit, what they're exactly looking at, when they intend to complete the audit. I do not know. Aristotle, to their credit, has provided responses that they have given to USAC. Some of those responses have generated concerns for me, simply because it suggests the company is advertising in Missouri, suggesting that perhaps the company is installing facilities in Missouri, and none of that is true. But I don't know what prompted the pictures, the information that Aristotle provided, so I don't know. All I see is how Aristotle has provided information to USAC.
Okay. The next one you may not know, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Has Aristotle filed a transfer agreement with the FCC for approval, to your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. If they did, what's the timeline for that approval process?
I don't know. I think it depends on the situation. I think in terms of these sort of transfers, it's smoother if the company acquiring the broadband obligations is already an established ETC, and that appears to be the situation here if they intend to pursue the Section 214 transfer.
I'm going to ask the judge a question. The agreement that's filed on the mutual confidentiality agreement, can we discuss that?
Is this from Ms. Bowles' testimony? To be safe, I think we can, but to be safe, let me double check with counsel for Aristotle. Mr. Lumley, could you approach? I want you to look at this document, and I don't think it's confidential, but I just want to verify. Thank you.
Judge, as long as the name of the other party is not discussed, the name would be confidential, but the terms would not be.
Mr. Lumley, thank you. Commissioner, when you're ready.
Mr. Van Eschen, I'm looking at a document where Aristotle is engaged in a mutual confidentiality agreement with another internet service provider, or ETC. And were you aware of that confidentiality agreement?
I'm not exactly sure the purpose of that agreement.
Okay. I'm wondering if this mutual confidentiality agreement precedes a transfer agreement. Do you have any knowledge of the workings
not.
of? Okay, thank you.
All right, Commissioner, thank you. Let me see if we have any questions based on bench questions. Mr. Lumley, any cross based on those bench questions?
No, sir.
All right, thank you. Let me see if we have any further bench questions. Commissioner Coleman?
No, Judge.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Holzman?
No, thank you, Judge.
Thank you. Commissioner Holland, any further questions? Any redirect, Ms. Gerlach?
No questions, thank you, Judge.
All right, thank you. May this witness be excused.
Yes.
Right. Mr. Van Eschen, thank you very much. You may step down. Ms. Gerlach, any further evidence?
None from staff, thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Lumley, any evidence?
Yes, Judge, and preliminary question, what exhibit number would you want assigned to our exhibits? Do you want to start at 200 or?
I think so.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Lumley.
And then for the confidential portion, just call that 200 HC or C or,
HC would be fine, thank you.
okay, thank you, Judge. And call Elizabeth Bowles to the witness stand.
Ms. Bowles, if you'll come forward to be sworn, please. Do you swear the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you very much. You may have a seat. Mr. Lumley, when you're ready, sir.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you, Judge. Would you state your name, please?
Elizabeth Bowles, Bowles,
And by whom are you employed?
Aristotle Unified Communications.
And in what capacity?
I'm the CEO.
Did you submit pre-filed direct testimony on behalf of Aristotle in this case?
I did.
And you just heard me discussing that with the judge. Those exhibits would be marked Exhibit 200, and then a confidential Schedule 5 would be Exhibit 200 HC. Is that, you understand we're talking about the same thing?
Yes.
And do you have that testimony in front of you?
Yes, I do.
Do you have any corrections to your pre-filed testimony?
I don't have any corrections, but I realized that in my bio, I left off that I had been appointed by Chairman Pai to serve as the chair of the Broadband Deployment Advisory Committee for the FCC in 2017, and I held that position for 4 years. That's an advisory body that was tasked with making policy recommendations to the FCC for eliminating the digital divide. I left that out of my resume.
If I asked you the questions set forth in your pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers be the same today?
They would be.
And just to provide a heads up to the commission, do you anticipate Aristotle will be submitting a name change to the commission in the near future?
Yes, we have converted from an LLC to a C corporation, so we'll be changing our name from Aristotle Unified Communications LLC to Aristotle Unified Communications, Inc.
Does that have anything to do with the issues in this case?
No.
I move for the admission of Exhibits 200 and 200 HC.
Any objections?
None, Your Honor.
Right, hearing no objections, Exhibits 200 and 200 HC are admitted.
Thank you. And Elizabeth, do you have Mr. John Van Eshen's pre-filed direct testimony
I do.
available to you? And have you read that prior to today?
I have.
I ask you to turn to page 2. On page 2, Mr. Van Eshen states that staff's position is that Aristotle is not using CAF2 funds or CAF2 funds as intended. Has Aristotle used any CAF2 funds for improper purposes?
We have not.
And are you relying solely on your own judgment in that regard or on other resources?
No, we have FCC counsel, and we confirmed with him that how we were using the funds qualifies. We also have a slide deck from FCC counsel for regulatory compliance that outlines proper use and improper use of funds, and we have used funds only for proper purposes.
I refer you to confidential Schedule 5 of your testimony.
Yes.
And what is that schedule?
That is a breakdown of where we have spent the Missouri CAF2 funds as of 10/31/2023.
And does it identify categories of expenditures?
It does, yes.
Are the names of the categories confidential?
No, not the names.
So can you identify what the categories are?
Sure. Long-form application for the state of Missouri, which is engineering and prepping that application for the FCC. The application to become an ETC in Missouri when we first did that. Ongoing compliance in Missouri, the Missouri standby letter of credit fees, and then network deployment.
And network deployment consists of what subcategories?
Distribution equipment, backhaul equipment, customer premises equipment, routers, cabinet and ground equipment, and steel for tower construction.
And also labor?
Yes, labor.
At the bottom of the first page of Schedule 5, what are the headings for the last 3 lines?
Total spent, total Missouri CAF II funds received and net Missouri CAF II funds remaining
And
deficit.
is the net a positive or negative number?
It's a negative number.
And what does it mean that it's a negative number?
It means that we've spent more funds than we've received.
And as of what date
This would be 10/31
of this year?
of this year, yes, sorry.
And what's shown on the second page of Schedule 5?
Anticipated expenditures through the end of the year.
And does that have a net figure as well?
Yes, it is a negative number as well.
And is the negative net as of December 31st larger or smaller than the negative net as of October 31st?
It's substantially higher.
Your testimony was filed on November 17th, and it's now December 12th. Are the projections on page 2 of Schedule 5 turning out to be accurate projections?
They're going to be very close. Obviously, these projections did not take into account the cost of this investigation or the cost of the USAC audit, but other than that, yes.
As of today, do you still expect that Aristotle will have spent more than just the CAF II funds it's received for Missouri as of the end of the year?
Yes, absolutely.
And do you expect that negative number to be larger or smaller than what's shown as a projection on Schedule 5?
Probably larger.
You explained in your direct testimony at page 6 that because the commission missed the October deadline to certify Aristotle under Rule 54.314, that the support funds that could be paid in 2024 are being reduced as each day passes. And you
Yes.
testify that the monthly installments of the CAF funds have been $25,000. So how much has been lost for
So those are-
2024 as of right now?
Well, rough numbers was 50,000 at the end of November, and it's $833 a day going forward.
And does that $833 a day translate to a reality in the field?
Yeah, put another way, it costs roughly $800 to install a customer. So every $833 lost is the equivalent of losing one customer installation a day.
And can these lost funds be recovered to the best of your knowledge?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
You were in the hearing room while Mr. Van Eschen was testifying, correct?
Yes.
And you heard Commissioner Hahn's questions about what happens to these funds. Do you have
Yep.
knowledge about what happens to these funds?
I do, actually. So when funds are taken by the FCC for whatever reason, either through company default or because of this, where there's a delay in certification of a company, those funds go back into the bucket and are redistributed in whatever manner the FCC chooses at some later point. So they may or may not, as you pointed out, come back to the state of Missouri because it'll go into whatever their next reverse auction is. So the funds that are lost for the late certification are effectively lost to the state.
With or without these lost funds, will Aristotle and/or a transferee of Aristotle of these Missouri census blocks in Howell, Oregon, and Ozark counties ever catch up so that the support funds equal the amount spent?
No, even if 100% of the funds are received, deployment is significantly more expensive than the amount of funds received through the CAF II program. The funds from CAF II are intended to serve as a subsidy of sorts. They're not actually a subsidy, but they're intended to pay a portion of the total deployment, not the entire amount.
If the commission does not promptly certify Aristotle under Rule 54.314 and all the remaining funds for 2024 and presumably beyond are lost, how will that impact the delivery of broadband to the people of these counties?
It would make it a lot more expensive and more difficult to do, and I don't know if you've driven through the counties, but they're extremely difficult topographically and expensive to deploy. So loss of that funding would make it very difficult for a company to deploy broadband successfully into those areas.
If Aristotle is successful in transferring the census blocks to another provider, and hopefully funding resumes later in 2024 or 2025, how would the loss of funds impact the provision of fixed wireless broadband to the people of these counties?
I assume it would be the same thing for a new provider. I mean, if a provider took over, they're not going to receive these lost funds either for the delayed certification. So they'd have to figure out whether they could continue to meet all of the requirements without the money. at least that portion of the money.
On page 3 of his testimony, Mr. Van Eschen states that the commission did not include Aristotle on its list of certified companies under Rule 54.314 for 2024.
That is my understanding.
Have you learned when the commission made that decision?
I believe they made it on October 21st.
October or September?
September, excuse me, wrong month. September 21st. I didn't have my note in front of me. Yeah, September 21st.
And was that before or after the due date for Aristotle's response to staff's negative recommendation?
Before. I think our response was due on September 27th, so about a week before.
Did Aristotle submit a timely response to staff's recommendations, to
We
your
did.
understanding?
Yes.
Did you know the commission had left Aristotle off the list when the response was filed?
We did not know that, no.
Is that response scheduled forward to your testimony?
Yes, it is.
And it was sworn before a notary?
It was.
What's the subject of page 6 and the top of page 7 of Schedule 4?
Oh, maintaining ETC status in Missouri? Is that? Oh, staff argument that we did not adequately explain how our funding was being used? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry. Read the wrong header.
Have you watched the recording of the commission's September 21st agenda session?
Yes, I have since then.
Was Aristotle mentioned by name?
We were not.
Was any company mentioned by name?
Not that, no.
Was there any mention of any unnamed company being left off the certification?
Yes.
What was the reason stated?
That the company had failed to file reports.
Did Aristotle fail to file any required reports?
No, and for that reason, we actually thought they weren't talking about us.
On page 4 of his testimony, Mr. Van Eschen testifies that Aristotle has not installed any equipment or facilities in Missouri. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And why is that the case?
We have not installed equipment in Missouri because we are looking at doing a transfer, and upon communication with that company, we elected to reverse our deployment, and we do have equipment for installation in Missouri. However, we elected to use the sublease spectrum option primarily, and will be deploying equipment when we have customers who are looking to be installed.
Do those changes prevent Aristotle from providing service?
They do not.
How could Aristotle provide service?
We are subleasing spectrum from 2 separate companies, and we are utilizing that data service to deliver a fixed wireless broadband service at the home. The customers are ours, and I think we'll get into that a little bit later, how we're doing that. But the answer is that it is permissible to utilize data services through a third company, so long as we are providing the service to the home, which we are doing.
On page 9, Mr. Van Eschen expresses the opinion that Aristotle's service arrangements do not comply with FCC funding requirements. Do you agree with that?
No, I do not.
Why not?
Because FCC funding requirements specifically allow a company to utilize a blend of self-provided, self-funded, and third-party or leased facilities.
He caveats his opinion by indicating the FCC is better suited to make that decision. Do you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you have any concern that the FCC wouldn't find Aristotle's service arrangement to be compliant?
None at all. It is compliant.
On page 6, Mr. Van Eschen states that Aristotle plans to resell fixed wireless data service provided by others. Is that accurate?
It is sort of accurate. We are not actually reselling data services provided by another party. We are utilizing bandwidth of a third party to provide data services ourselves. So it's not technically a resale.
He also testifies on page 6 that Aristotle would install equipment at customer locations.
Correct. That equipment enables us to interconnect with the spectrum that we are using to deliver the broadband service.
And that would be equipment that Aristotle owns.
Yes, equipment we own and install.
And then you'd use it in conjunction with that spectrum you were just speaking of.
Yes.
Can you describe that equipment?
Yes, actually I can. So the spectrum that we're utilizing is an LTE spectrum in part, and LTE can be used for mobility, which is how most people are familiar with it, and that you obviously connect with the cell phone, but we're actually using it to deliver a fixed wireless service, which the company that we're borrowing spectrum from or leasing spectrum from is US Cellular. They don't offer a fixed wireless service in these areas. So what we use is it's a piece of equipment. It's about this big, a foot and a half by a foot and a half. And we actually have, if you want to see it, we have one over there. And we attach that on a mount on the roof or on a pole in their yard. And so it enables us to provide broadband services of actually 66 megs down with using the same spectrum, even in areas where mobility service would not be available.
On page 5, Mr. Van Eschen discusses construction of towers.
Yeah,
Did Aristotle initially plan to install towers?
we did, yes, actually.
And did those plans change?
They did change.
And why was that?
They changed for a few reasons. One is that we are looking to do a transfer, and discussions about that transfer actually began in late 2019, early 2020. So we've been having discussions with this company about transferring these blocks now for several years. We are only half of that equation, and that company has other things that have taken their attention. And so the delays were actually not on our part, but there's been an agreement that this transfer would be something that the two companies would do at some point. So we were very aware that we wanted to be efficient with the money. And because this company does have deployments in Howell County and it also has deployments in other areas of Missouri, we did not want to duplicate where they were already putting money by building a $300,000 tower. I mean, one tower is 1/10 of the total amount of money we receive for the state. So we want to be very prudent about how this money is spent for the best interests of Missouri consumers. And he didn't want some of the towers where we were putting them, and he already had towers in some locations where we were considering. So we took a step back and looked at it. That's the first reason. The second reason is that we did become aware that we could utilize existing 700 megahertz spectrum because the equipment had changed between when we won the bid in 2018 and today to make it possible for us to provide a fixed wireless service over these LTE signals. And at the same time, COVID happened in the middle of receiving our money in 2019 and 2022, causing the cost of materials to go up because of the supply chain, et cetera, et cetera. And all of that caused the cost of a tower. And I know this is one of your questions later. I must go ahead and answer it. It caused the cost of a tower to go up from as low as $50,000 to as high as $350,000 for the exact same tower. And so it became not the best choice to deploy those towers until we were perfectly clear on what was going to happen with the transfer, whether that was going to happen or not happen.
Do you anticipate that Aristotle or a successor will need to install some towers eventually to serve
Yeah.
in these 3 counties?
Absolutely. There's no way to serve all 788 locations without installing something.
Does it matter whether the towers are installed at the beginning or the end of the milestone schedule?
Not at all.
If Aristotle lost all the funds for 2024, how much would that be?
$300,000,
So the cost of a tower.
pretty much, yeah.
On page 7, Mr. Van Eschen describes successful tests of Aristotle's service
Yes,
at 3 locations in Missouri, 1 in each county, correct?
yes.
How did those tests come about?
Mr. Van Eschen selected the locations. He informed them where we would be going the day. And actually, the individual who did the test with him, Rick, is here. And we sent up 2 staff members, Rick and another technician, met Mr. Van Eschen in the field, and went to the locations he had selected.
And the tests were successful?
All 3 of them were successful.
And what does successful mean in that context?
It means that the service was capable of delivering speeds of 25 megs down, 3 megs up from the router, from our router.
Has Aristotle conducted other tests in the CAF2 Missouri census blocks?
Yes, so we have. We have actually had field staff in Missouri over the last 2.5 weeks doing network testing to determine where the holes in the network are and where we might have to deploy additional facilities.
At page 9, footnote 11, Mr. Van Eschen states that Aristotle at one point provided staff with speed tests from Arkansas
Yes.
locations. How do you respond to that?
Well, we thought we had made clear in our filing, but maybe we didn't, that because we did not have Missouri customers, and because this was the same equipment that we intended to put on towers in Missouri, we provided the Arkansas test to demonstrate that the equipment was capable of meeting the speeds we were supposed to meet. We certainly did not mean to create the impression that those were somehow connected to Missouri tests. It was literally just to show what the equipment could do.
Did you call out that they were Arkansas tests?
Yes, we did.
On page 8, Mr. Van Eschen testifies about a software program that evaluates service availability.
Yep.
Can you provide some more detail about that?
Sure. So the software program, we put in the tower height, the type of radio, the spectrum that is being distributed over, and it creates what's called a propagation map. And the propagation map has multiple colors going from red, meaning a really strong signal, to purple, meaning no signal at all. And we can put an address in this map, and it locates it within that propagation, and it tells us pretty much down to the rooftop level where we would need to put the antenna in order to ensure that that customer could get a signal.
Has Aristotle bought equipment to use in Missouri?
Yes, we have.
And is that expenditure shown on Schedule 5 that we were talking about earlier?
Yes, yes.
On page 8, Mr. Van Eschen acknowledges that Aristotle has told staff that the equipment to be used in Missouri is being stored in Arkansas.
Yes.
And he goes on to say that such equipment can be used in other states. Is that accurate?
No.
And why not?
Well, for two reasons. One, equipment bought from Missouri with CAF money from Missouri needs to be used in Missouri. And second, there are certain frequencies that we're using and equipment in Missouri that we're using that we're not using in other states. So any equipment that we use for the fixed LTE in Missouri can pretty much only be used in Missouri. We don't use that spectrum in Arkansas. And the only Tirana equipment, which is that's a radio manufacturer, is also in Missouri. We don't have that deployed in any of the other states that we serve right now.
Can you spell the name of that company?
Tarana. Tirana, yes.
Are Howell, Ozark, and Oregon counties adjacent to Arkansas?
They are.
Where's Aristotle's main office?
It's in Little Rock, downtown,
Where's its warehouses?
in North Little Rock, about 30 minutes closer to Missouri.
Is the equipment bought for use in Missouri just lumped in with other equipment in storage?
No.
How is it segregated?
We have a pretty robust inventory system, and we keep it segregated both from a software perspective and on the shelf.
At page 7, Mr. Van Eschen says he does not know if Aristotle can install equipment at customer premises in a timely manner.
We can.
Do you know whether Aristotle can do that
Yes, we can.
in Missouri?
Yes, in Missouri. Can I address that a little bit?
Yeah.
It takes 3 hours to get from our office in Little Rock, or our warehouse in Little Rock, to Missouri. So in a day, an installer could go from Little Rock to Missouri and do the installation and technically come home that evening, if necessary. But in addition, the company that we're looking at making the transfer to, we do have an agreement with them whereby they will install for us for a fee that is to be negotiated. Essentially, the way this company operates is like, well, we'll do that for you. We'll let you know later how much we'll charge. So that's something that if we needed it and we had enough installs to justify it. But honestly, right now, if we had 3 or 4 installs, we would schedule them all within a couple of days and send somebody up from Little Rock and take care of it. We're obligated by the FCC to install within 10 days, and we install generally within 5.
And
Weather
that's
permitting.
That's in all states.
It's in every state, yeah.
On page 12, Mr. Van Eschen says Aristotle has avoided installing equipment at customer premises. Is that accurate?
No,
Is there any benefit to Aristotle to not install equipment that it has stored in its warehouse reserved for Missouri use?
none whatsoever.
Mr. Van Eschen goes on to describe a meeting he had with the potential transferee of Aristotle's Missouri census blocks
Yes.
and indicates that this company and others have arranged for transmitting signals for Aristotle customers. Is that accurate?
It's a very 10,000-foot statement of what's happening. What we're doing is they do have spectrum that they are subleasing us, and they will enable us to interconnect. However, we're providing the equipment and the customer is ours. So they are providing us bandwidth pretty much the same way if we bought a direct internet access circuit from AT&T and ran it to a tower for internet so that we could distribute that signal. That's effectively what we're doing. We're using Whisper's bandwidth, I'm sorry, that company's bandwidth, to reach other areas.
On page 9, Mr. Van Eschen expresses concern about lack of written agreements between Aristotle and these other companies. Is that concern well-founded?
No.
Why not?
Well, we do have a written agreement with the other company. We have the NDA. We also have a one-page, I guess a memorandum of understanding would be the best way to characterize it, which I believe that we did submit to staff. And we also have an agreement with US Cellular. So, and it's also not a concern because this other company and Aristotle have been in communication for years. Our companies have known each other since founding, since 2010. We've been in business together, and there is a lot of mutual trust between the two companies. And so there's not really any concern on our part that they will not follow through with what they commit to, and nor is there any concern on their part that we will follow through.
On page 4, Mr. Van Eschen identifies the milestones that Aristotle is supposed to meet,
Yes.
including 40% of targeted locations by 12/31/2022 and 60% of targeted locations by the end of this year.
Yes.
What is a targeted location?
So I believe that he means the 788 locations that the FCC gave Aristotle CAF2 money to serve. The FCC doesn't use the term targeted locations, it just uses the term locations, but I'm assuming that's what he means.
And is a location a specific customer?
It's not, it is either a residence or a business or a, what are they called? The hospital or a school, a community
Institutional.
anchor institution. So it's one of those things, and the obligation is that the FCC believes there's 788 of it, and it's our obligation to tell the FCC which locations in those census blocks we cover.
Did Aristotle meet its 2022 milestone?
We did.
Do you believe Aristotle will meet its 2023 milestone?
We do.
What are your current expectations about meeting milestones beyond 2023?
So we're a little concerned about it because without CAF2 funding, it's going to be very difficult for us to build. We're not really sure of the impact on our company's obligation of not being certified by the state of Missouri. We don't know what impact that has in terms of whether we are required to meet the next milestone if we are not receiving CAF2 funds because we are not certified to do so in 2024. And obviously, the conversations with the other company are impacted by this decision as well, because the funds that are lost are going to be lost to them or to us, regardless of which of us is. So I'm a little concerned. I mean, obviously, if we need to meet them for the FCC, we will meet them, but not being an ETC in Missouri is going to make that difficult.
Do these milestones have anything to do with the 54.314 rule certification process?
I do not believe so, no.
If Aristotle were to miss a milestone, would that result in an immediate termination of support funding?
No.
On page 6, Mr. Van Eschen states that Rule 47 CFR 54.320 would apply in that circumstance. Are you familiar with that rule?
I am, yeah.
Do you agree that that's the rule that would apply if a milestone were missed?
Yes.
What's your understanding of what would happen if any company missed its milestone? What's the process?
So if USAC determines that a company missed its milestone, they'll determine by what percent the company missed their milestone. So it could be, it does happen that a company will certify 50% of their locations, and the USAC will eliminate 20% of those just because they don't feel that they're actual locations or for other reasons. So it happens regularly that companies miss milestones for whatever reason. The USAC will determine at that point whether they want to withhold a portion of funds, and how much is withheld or how much they can withhold temporarily is determined by what percentage the milestone is missed. So if they miss it by 10%, then there's a certain percentage that can be withheld. The company is then given 6 months to fix that problem. And then if they don't fix it in 6 months, then there are additional steps that the USAC can take. But then then they get another 6 months to finish it. And if after a year they've solved the problem, then the company gets not only reinstated to the full amount going forward, they get 100% of the funds that have been withheld going backwards.
So unlike the loss of PSC certification under 54.314, funds withheld for delays in meeting milestones can be regained.
Yes, that's correct.
On page 5, Mr. Van Eschen testifies that the FCC sent a letter to Aristotle regarding deployments as of the end of 2021.
Yes.
Was there a 2021 milestone?
No,
Has the FCC sent any subsequent such letters to Aristotle?
no.
Mr. Van Eschen goes on to testify that Aristotle's 2022 milestone report states that services became available to all involved locations on the same date, being December 31st, 2022. Did he interpret that report correctly?
No, he didn't, but I know why he interpreted it that way, but it's an incorrect interpretation.
Why was the December 31st, 2022 date used?
So it's not usually my practice to blame things on our own staff. However, the person who was obligated to certify, their job was to certify into the hub, did not understand that she was supposed to put date of service and instead put date of filing. And she did wait until the last minute to make the certification. And so because it was all waited to the last minute, she put in the date it was due, December 31st, 2022, as opposed to the date service was available.
Did you explain that to staff over the course of this proceeding?
We tried to.
Mr. Van Eschen states that Aristotle was unable to explain its progress in offering service to the locations. Do you agree with that?
I don't.
Why not?
Well, we tried to explain it, but honestly, I think that staff may have a misunderstanding of how the CAF2 program works versus the way other federal programs work. And I know we'll get into this in a minute, but I think that to some extent, we were not able to explain it in a manner that made sense based on staff's understanding of the program.
Mr. Van Eschen states that Aristotle's website failed to indicate service was available in Missouri until late summer 2023.
That is correct.
And is that accurate?
Yes, it is.
Why did Aristotle wait until then?
Well, we were in the last quarter of 2022, the second company was moving forward and had indicated that they would be moving forward with the transfer and that we would be relatively quickly. We were expecting agreements from them in November of 2022. We did not receive those, but I did believe, first of all, that the transfer would take place relatively quickly, and second of all, that once filed, it would be approved relatively quickly by the FCC, and we were concerned that if we went to these people in Missouri and said, listen, here's Aristotle, we're going to give you this broadband service, and then 1 month or 2 months later, it's like, oh, guess what, it's this other company now, that we would create consumer confusion. And it was probably late spring when we realized this isn't going to move as quickly as we thought. And so we decided that we needed to be more aggressive in actually trying to onboard customers in Missouri, not because we hadn't been aggressive, but because we really didn't want to create consumer confusion.
On page 6, Mr. Van Eschen testifies that he testifies about a USAC audit of Aristotle.
Yes.
Is it your understanding such an audit is underway?
Oh, it is underway.
And who is USAC?
It's the Universal Services Administrative Corporation. It's a quasi-governmental, quasi-private agency that administers the location testing and funding for the FCC, for the CAF2 and other high-cost programs.
Has that audit commenced?
Yes.
Has Aristotle cooperated?
Yes.
Has the audit been completed?
No.
Has USAC provided Aristotle with any interim information about the status of the audit?
No, in fact, the last round of information they asked for was due yesterday, so we have not heard from them since yesterday.
And it was submitted yesterday?
It was submitted, yes.
On page 7, Mr. Van Eschen testifies that Aristotle does not have any fixed wireless broadband customers in Missouri yet. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
On page 11, he takes issue with Aristotle's lack of advertising and goes on page 12 to state, and I quote, "It's doubtful anyone in Howell, Oregon, or Ozark counties has even heard of Aristotle." Do you think that it's doubtful that anyone has heard of Aristotle?
No, I don't think it's doubtful that anyone has heard of Aristotle.
Has Aristotle been contacted by people in these counties?
Yes, we have.
Were they in the awarded census blocks?
No, they were not.
Have you been contacted by people in Missouri outside of those counties?
Yes.
Does advertising have anything to do with 54.314 certification?
I don't believe so, no.
Describe Aristotle's marketing efforts in Missouri.
So we do a number of different things in marketing, and it's the same in every market. One of those things is the website. One of those things is social media. One of those things is Facebook ads or other online ads. We use door hangers and yard signs. One of the issues that we've run into first of all, and network-wide, 72% of our leads come from word of mouth or social media. So that is where a lot of our efforts go, pretty much in every state we're in. We did look at hanging door hangers in Missouri, but there's only 788 locations. They are behind locked gates. They're half a mile from the driveway. They have beware of dog signs. I mean, I know that Rick Hales and Mr. Van Eschen ran into a resident who was very upset that we were running a test on her property because she hadn't been told in advance. And so because of how dispersed these 788 locations are, and because of how difficult it is to actually go up to the door, it's not a conducive environment for door hangers specifically. And so we are going to send mailers to those 788 locations. And if depending on what happens in this hearing, if we start serving areas like West Plains that are not in those locations, but that are generally in the counties, then absolutely we'll use door hangers. But for the census blocks that we're required to serve, the on-the-field marketing doesn't make a lot of sense from a safety perspective for our staff. That said, when we've been out testing, we have a branded truck. We have the guys handed out cards to people. They had a number of conversations, so I do believe there are people in those counties that are aware of our existence.
At page 10, Mr. Van Eschen states that Aristotle is just collecting and retaining CAF2 funds. Is that true?
No, that's not true.
And again, that relates to your Schedule 5?
Yes.
At page 13, Mr. Van Eschen testifies about Aristotle's desire to transfer its Missouri census blocks to another carrier. Why does Aristotle want to do that?
So we won 788 locations, and the other carrier is a very large service provider that covers a lot of the state of Missouri, including portions of Howell County. And when we looked at the efficiency and the service level and what consumers in Missouri would be best served by, it made sense to both companies that that company take over our census blocks. And I will say that the first expression of interest did come from that company to us, and we agreed with them that that was a more effective way and a better way to serve Missouri consumers would be to transfer them to a Missouri company.
And has a transfer application been submitted to the FCC?
No, their FCC council recommended that we start with an operating agreement, and that is what has been underway since last year. And we do have a draft of it now. And then once the operating agreement is in place, we will move on to the transfer agreement.
Commissioner Hahn had some questions about a non-disclosure agreement. Do you recall that?
I do.
What's the purpose of that non-disclosure agreement?
To allow the companies to share what would otherwise be proprietary information between the two companies.
For what purpose?
To assess the engineering and to ensure that, one, that the transfer made sense for the other company, and two, that where we were considering putting our locations would work with where they were serving already and where they wanted to put new locations so that we could align the engineering.
And have both companies executed that agreement, signed that agreement?
Oh, the non-disclosure, yes.
And you also referred to a short memorandum of understanding, correct?
Yes.
And what's the purpose of that document?
Was just to memorialize that we were in conversations about an operating agreement and a possible transfer, and to put a stake in the ground that essentially said that if needed, the other company would do installations for Aristotle.
And has that been signed by both companies?
It has been.
Do you currently have an expectation as to when the transfer application would be submitted to the FCC?
The transfer application should be submitted probably at the first of the year. And I think that part of the delay on it already being done is this hearing. I think that the other company wants to know what's going to come out of this so that they know what they're dealing with. There's a little bit of uncertainty that's been introduced. So and with the holidays, my anticipation would be, assuming that they still want to go forward, it would be beginning of next year.
And if the transfer application is submitted, what would you anticipate happening while it was pending?
Well, optimally, we would have an operating agreement with the other company, and they would take over operations of the Missouri network while the application is pending.
And does the FCC allow that?
Absolutely. We have a similar relationship with a company in Illinois for our Illinois deployment.
Does the FCC generally approve these kinds of transfers?
You know, as far as Section 214 transfers, I think it depends, and I think Mr. Van Eschen touched on this, on who the transferee is. But yes, they do. They do generally approve them, but not always.
Under the operating agreement that you were discussing, would Aristotle provide the support funds it receives to the operating company proposed transferee to be using in Missouri?
Yes, we would.
And is that allowed by the FCC?
It is.
If Aristotle is not certified under Rule 54.314, while the transfer application is pending, will it continue to lose $25,000 a month
Yes,
in support funds?
I believe so. Well, yes, absolutely. If we're not certified, we will not be receiving funds, which would make it very difficult for us to pay any third party to operate the network. So I imagine that would put a freeze on the operating agreement, and I do not know what it would do with respect to the ultimate transfer of the blocks.
And you're not aware of any opportunity to recover the lost funds?
Not from the late certification, no. I mean, maybe we could apply for a waiver with the FCC, but I'm not aware of any method to get those back.
At page 13, Mr. Van Eschen states, resumption of CAF II funds would likely make it easier for Aristotle to reach terms for the transfer of the Missouri census blocks. Is that accurate?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Do you see anything wrong with that?
No.
Would it help or hurt the spread of broadband in these rural counties?
It would help the spread of broadband in these counties, whether Aristotle is doing deployment and installation, or the operating company is doing deployment and installation. It will only benefit Missouri consumers.
Did you anticipate that this transfer process would drag on as long as it has?
No, not at all.
In hindsight, if you had known, would you have done some things differently?
Yes, I think I would have been, I very much relied on the timing that I was being given by the other company, and I think I would have been a lot more assertive in some ways in getting things done differently earlier, and I definitely would have advertised earlier, but hindsight is 20/20, and I didn't know it was going to take this long. And so once we understood the delays were likely, not only the past delays, but also that a Section 214 transfer can take 6 months to a year just to make its way through the FCC. When we learned that at the beginning of the year, we realized we're just going to have to operate this. We're going to have to operate the network. We're going to have to assume that this transfer is not going through. And that was prior to being informed that we wouldn't be certified as an ETC, which then threw another wrench into it.
Mr. Van Eschen ends his testimony with a recommendation that the commission stand by its decision to not certify Aristotle under 54.314 and have its CAF 2 funding cease as of January 1st. Do you believe the commission should do that?
No.
What are you asking the commission to do instead?
Ideally, it would be good for the commission to recertify Aristotle or approve recertification of Aristotle today, but if not today, then as soon as possible. Because as we noted earlier, every day of delay is $833 lost to the state of Missouri.
I don't have any further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Lumley, thank you. Ms. Gerlach, any cross?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I would like to ask, how many Missouri customers does Aristotle have right now?
2.
There are 2 customers across the 3 counties?
No, actually, they're not. They're email customers, and so they're not in either of those counties. One of them is in Kansas City, I think, and I don't remember where the other one is.
Can you please clarify what an email customer is?
Yes, they actually pay us a certain amount of money a year for email, to have an Aristotle email address, and for spam filtering and that type of thing.
Okay, so they're not using any type of internet service. They're strictly, they have a Aristotle email.
Yeah, we do not have broadband customers in Missouri at this time.
Okay. So you referenced $833 a day, and it takes around $800 to install a customer.
Yes.
But Aristotle has not installed any customers in Missouri?
No, we haven't, no.
Okay. You were talking about the potential transfer, and apparently the discussion started in 2022?
No, the discussion started, the first conversation with the other company took place in late 2019.
Okay, in late 2019. So at that point, Aristotle was hoping to transfer its interest to another company?
Yes,
And
yes.
And it's been the same company that you've been
Yes.
discussing transfer with? Okay.
Correct.
And is this also the same company that Aristotle has an agreement with right now to provide services?
Yes,
Okay, and you said that this is a company that you have had interactions with for a long time and have known them and trust them?
yes,
Okay. And you had hoped that the transfer would be complete by the end of 2022 after discussions since 2019. But it's drug on. You said you would do things differently, is that correct?
I think that we would have, well, I don't know exactly what we could have done differently other than what we did, but we would have potentially made different decisions with respect to advertising our services and making a splash about our company in these counties in Missouri had we realized that the other company was not ready to move forward in late 2022, or had we realized that it takes 6 to 12 months to do a Section 214 transfer.
Okay. And you are hopeful that this transfer would occur by the start of this year?
We are hopeful that the operating agreement will be signed and that the transfer will be filed by the first of this year. There is no way that the transfer will be completed by the first of the year because we do not control that timing. That is the FCC.
And so then the transfer would not occur likely until maybe 2025 if it takes 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, I think
it's
worst case.
possible.
Yeah, worst case. I think best case it would be mid-2024.
And the final benchmark at which point 100% of services should be provided is the December 31st of 2024, correct?
No.
What is the final benchmark? Is that?
It's 60% this year, 80% in 2024, and 100% in December 2025.
Okay, thank you. Can you tell me how many employees does Aristotle have across, for the whole company?
37.
And how many of those are Missouri employees?
None.
Okay. After receiving the CAF 2 funding, how soon did somebody from Aristotle visit Missouri, specifically the targeted counties?
How soon after receiving the CAF 2 funding? Within 6 months.
Okay, I'm sorry, and I mean the award, not necessarily the funding itself.
Oh, the award? Oh, so yeah, after we were awarded in November of 2018.
Right.
The long form was due in February of 2019. We sent people up to the counties in between those two periods to finalize our long form.
Okay. And were those officials, were those field
Engineers.
employees, engineers? Okay.
Judge, could I interject just for the benefit of the court reporter? Both witness and lawyer starting to talk over each other. and-
Sorry.
Thank you. Has Aristotle hired more employees since receiving CAF 2 awards?
Yes.
Okay. Has Aristotle hired any contractors for the state of Missouri to perform any work?
We were working with the other company, and that's what the operating agreement would do. And we have been in communication with subcontractors that would be primarily in the satellite industry, which is generally where you can find subcontractors that can do installation work.
And that would be specifically for Missouri?
Yes, in Missouri, no, yes.
Okay.
We obviously have those contractors already in Arkansas.
Okay, thank you. And you said Aristotle would use its own employees to install service at a customer's residence if a customer asked for service, correct?
Yes, I believe what I said is, in the worst case, even if we were the ones doing the installation, it could be done quickly.
And that's also how Aristotle would address any service concerns?
Yes.
Okay. Let me see. So Aristotle received CAF 2 awards in other states too, is that correct?
Yes.
4 other states?
Yes.
Are the number of targeted areas in those other states different from Missouri?
Every state is different.
Okay, are they more or less areas than Missouri?
It depends on the state. I think that Oklahoma is more. It's about, I think, 1,500. Arkansas is many more. It's 5,000 or so. Illinois is fewer,
Okay,
like 300 or something. And I'm not actually sure about Mississippi. I think it's right around the same amount. It might be a little bit less or a little bit more. But it's
Okay.
only one county.
but similar to Missouri.
Similar to Missouri,
Is
but
there-
only one county.
Is Aristotle offering broadband services in all of those states?
Yes.
That it's offering? Okay. Are you offering through Aristotle's own towers and equipment, or do you have agreements with other companies in those states?
Both. It's a mix.
Okay. I know you mentioned in Illinois that you have a similar agreement.
Yes.
Is Aristotle offering any of its own independent services, or is it strictly by contracting with other companies in Illinois?
It's strictly by contracting with other companies in Illinois.
Okay. In Arkansas, it has its own equipment, I suppose?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And if I may, the reason that I know that the operating agreements are acceptable and the way that we're structuring it with the company in Missouri is acceptable is because that is the arrangement in Illinois, which has been filed by the FCC and was in 2019, and so therefore was approved at the time.
For clarification, when you say it was filed by the FCC?
Filed with the FCC, not by, sorry.
Okay, so Aristotle has not filed the agreements in Missouri with the FCC?
We don't have an operating agreement yet.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to understand
There's an
the
operating
process here.
agreement in place in Illinois.
Okay, thank you.
That operating agreement has been filed with the FCC and approved. So therefore, I know that the arrangement that we're trying to work through in Missouri is acceptable and complies with CAF 2 requirements.
And Aristotle hasn't transferred its interest in Illinois, it's strictly offering through an operating agreement?
Correct.
Thank you. Let's see. Did Aristotle have to file a plan with the FCC when it was bidding for the CAF 2 auction?
Can you define plan?
A proposal for how it would offer services in a given state.
So the reason I ask you to define plan is because that is, yes, but it depends on what you mean by plan. So what we filed with the FCC was not a full engineering model that says we're going to build X number of towers in Y locations and deliver this with this brand of radios. That is not what we filed or were required to file. What we filed was a long form that stated we will be using the following spectrum, the following types of equipment to deliver a fixed wireless broadband service that is capable of the speeds at which we've been awarded. So put another way, the money from the FCC was not awarded to build specific infrastructure. It wasn't awarded to build a specific tower. It was awarded to deliver broadband service to locations identified by the FCC. So we didn't file a plan maybe in the sense that you're asking, but we did file a statement of what we would do to deliver service, and that is what we're doing.
Okay, thank you. Has Aristotle entered any other auctions or any other programs with the FCC to receive funding for expanding broadband service since the CAF II auction?
Yes, we're an RDOF recipient, Rural Development Opportunity Fund.
Okay. And that was shortly after the CAF II auction, correct?
No, well, yes, I guess it was, yes.
I believe it was about 2 years after the CAF II
Yeah.
auction. Is Missouri unique in providing broadband services from the other states that Aristotle offers or received CAF II awards for?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Is there something that presents a difficulty or a challenge to providing broadband in Missouri?
Well, yes, I mean, the topography is very challenging. The fact that the 788 locations are scattered, maybe it's 30 minutes as the crow flies, but it'll take 4 hours to get there. And there's a lot of, trees and mountains in between. So it's a challenging topography. I wouldn't say that it's unique. I mean, we have similar topography in Arkansas, and it is unique compared to Mississippi, which is flat. But it's not unique in terms of deployments we've done.
Okay, so Aristotle has deployed broadband in similar
Yes.
areas?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I know you were talking a little bit about the type of marketing and that you do. So normally you said your marketing would be using website, social media, Facebook ads, maybe door hangers and yard signs. You said you did not use door hangers in Missouri. Did you use yard signs in Missouri?
Well, we'd have to have permission from the homeowner
Okay.
to put in a yard sign. And so not at this time, but if we found appropriate locations. I mean, the guys, when they're in the field running tests, the guys they carry them in their truck. So if someone would allow us to put one up, we would. But, we can't just willy-nilly throw up a yard sign without permission.
Right. And just to clarify, so primarily the marketing that would have been done in Missouri is through your website and then social media and Facebook ads?
Yes. And I would like to note that we do have leads in Missouri. I think we have about 150-something leads. They just are not in the CAF II areas.
Okay. So the ads and that maybe aren't targeted the best to the counties where you have the CAF II awards, because by the nature of something that's online, it might be seen by anyone in the state of
Yeah.
Missouri or elsewhere.
I think that that's true, and to some extent, I think that could be true of any form of advertising. I mean, television commercials don't necessarily reach the audience they're trying to reach, but we have received requests, or at least one request from Ozark, the town. So at least we know that someone in Ozark, the town, picked up the ads. And people in Ozark County, it's going to be a challenge. These 788 locations, they may even see that we have service in their area and think that it exempts them. I mean, when Mr. Hales was up here over the last few weeks, he talked to several people, and they were surprised, I guess, that there was a provider willing to come in and they had satellite or whatever they had. And a lot of times, we deal with a lot of rural communities, and that was really what I did when I was on the BDAC.
Okay. I think let's go ahead. We're getting off the path here. So when you say satellite, there is service available in these areas. People are finding a way to have broadband?
It's not broadband. Satellite is not broadband.
Okay, so what is satellite, if you could clarify for us?
Satellite is a dish. It's like DirecTV or actually usually HughesNet, and effectively the signal goes from the house to space and back. And satellites have data caps because it's going to space and back, and they have limited capacity. And so the FCC does not consider satellite like HughesNet to be broadband, and it is not capable of delivering speeds of 25 by 3, which is what we're required to do.
Okay, so it's almost more like dial-up, like the old-
It is the dial-up of today, yes.
That's kind of, okay, thank you. And satellite is traditionally what we think of when we think of like a cable television, right? Something more like those, or
Yeah, like Dish or DirecTV.
like, okay.
Yeah, though not those companies, yeah.
So, so there is some type of service. You also mentioned Mr. Hales, and is that the gentleman that you were referencing?
Yes.
That was on the site visit with Mr. Van Eschen?
Yes.
Just for clarification. I would like to ask some questions about schedule number 5. I don't intend to talk specifically about dollars, but I think perhaps it's safer if we go in camera based on our discussion at the beginning of this.
All right, thank you. I'll ask council to verify if people in the room are entitled to be in the room, and I'll ask Brian if you can shut off the stream during the in-camera portion. And then, Ms. Scarlock, I'll count on you to let me know when you're done with that so we can go back into public forum.
Absolutely.
Are we ready to go in camera? And Brian, if you'll let me know when we're ready. All right, thank you, Ms. Gerlach.
Thank you, Judge. Has Aristotle established any agreements to own land in Missouri in the interest of building towers?
No, we don't generally purchase land.
Okay. Have you entered into any lease agreements or anything? Do you have any rights to land on which to build a tower in Missouri?
We had gone through the process of site acquisition and had identified where we wanted to lease, and at least several of the locations that we had identified upon conversations with the other company were not locations that they felt were optimal, and so therefore we did not execute any of those leases pending another discussion with them. We are in the process of acquiring for the 2 towers that we are building in Missouri because we are going to need those, and the other company agrees that those are necessary.
Okay, so all plans for towers and that were established in agreement or in consultation with the other company that you have been trying to negotiate a transfer with?
In part, but not exclusively, we do our own engineering. However, there was no sense in spending $300,000 to build a tower in a location where they already had a tower or a lease agreement for one.
Okay. So at this stage, you did say, though, that you were looking at building towers. Have you made, are you strictly relying on the transferee company?
No.
To do that? Okay, so you've established where you'd like to build towers, but you don't have any lease agreements, any construction permits?
We are I'm not sure what construction permits we need in those particular counties. I'm assuming we do, but no, we do not have the construction permits. We have identified the landlords and the locations, and we are determining which of the options will be the best location to serve the most. Which of the options before us will be the best place to put the tower in order to reach the most locations? I'm trying to avoid using the word locations in multiple contexts.
I understand. And with the equipment that you have already purchased, how many would you be able to build those 2 towers?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. So currently, you are working with 2 other companies in an effort to provide service to the 40% of the 788 locations.
Yes, I take contention in an effort to. We're working with those companies in order to provide.
Right, but there's no customers that are currently receiving broadband from those services, correct?
Yes, we do not control what customers choose to buy.
I understand. I'm just clarifying my use of the term. And Aristotle intends to meet the 60% goal by
Yes.
the end of this year. You
Yes.
said you intend to, so just to be clear, it's not.
Well, I should have said we will.
Okay,
I mean, we are going to. In fact, we're in the process right now of analyzing the locations that we already cover to determine how close we are. We might already actually be over 60%, but we don't know.
okay.
So we're
okay.
doing
So
that now.
it's just not clear at this point, but,
Yeah, no, we'll hit the 60%. I'm not concerned about that. This not being certified for 2024 is going to impact the next milestone, which is the 80% milestone. It's not going to impact the 60% milestone.
okay. And that 60% milestone is December 31st of
2023, yes.
Okay, thank you. And, let me see. Do you need an agreement with the owner of a particular tower in order to use or in order to place equipment on it?
Yes,
You don't currently have equipment placed on a tower, right?
no, but we have agreements with tower owners that would enable us to do so if there were a tower we wanted to use.
Okay. And so currently, the equipment that you're using that's on the tower is owned by one of the 2 companies that you are working with?
Correct.
Okay. But Aristotle doesn't own the tower or the equipment that's currently being used to provide service or meet the benchmarks?
No, and that's standard in the WISP industry. Very few WISPs build towers from the ground if they can avoid it because it's extremely expensive and then there's taxes involved. Most companies like ours, including the company we're transferring to, do not own the towers that they are located on. They lease space from a tower company like American Tower or Crown or any of those companies.
Okay, thank you. When you say WISP, Wireless Internet Service Provider?
Yes, sorry,
No,
acronym.
we use a lot of acronyms around here, and I try to get the court reporters as up to speed as I can. You referenced the software program that Aristotle uses. So you have a software program that tells you what locations you're able to provide service to?
Yes.
Okay. And is that how you determined when you wanted to contract with other companies to be able to provide service in Missouri? You located within the areas what might be available, or?
I'm not sure I'm clear on the question. I'm going to try to answer it this way. We identified the locations we needed to serve, and we did internal engineering to determine what would require to be done in order to reach those locations. And then when we identified another company that might have the ability to service those locations, we checked whether using that bandwidth or leasing that spectrum would be preferable to putting in our own tower. And then once we entered into an agreement with that company, or via this other company, an agreement with that company, we would then put it into the system and determine propagation. Engineering is an iterative process. You start with this extremely high level, which is what we submitted to the FCC, then you narrow it down, narrow it down, narrow it down, and throughout that, engineering changes. You may decide to put a tower here, you think it needs to be 200 feet, turns out it needs to be 300 feet. Turns out that it doesn't serve the location you want, and you have to move it entirely. That is what happens during the iterative process of engineering, so that is what we did. And the software that you're referring to is actually the very last piece of that. Once we know what the frequency is, where the tower is, what height it's at that point, we use that software to determine whether we can go to that location and where we need to install to ensure that they get the right signal.
Okay, thank you. All right, and then just to sort of clarify, because I know we've sort of bounced all over and we've covered some of this. So Aristotle has is working with two other companies, U.S. Cellular and then ETC number 2 is how you referred to the other one. And you have established a written agreement with U.S. Cellular?
Yes.
Okay. And what kind?
The agreement with U.S. Cellular enables us to use the spectrum off of any of their towers nationwide. And obviously, we're really only doing that in Missouri right now.
Okay.
But they have a fairly robust footprint in Illinois, but we're 80% certified in Illinois.
Okay, I think that covers me for that. And then there is a memorandum of understanding, you called it, between Aristotle and ETC number 2 to provide service.
Yes.
And are there rates established in those two documents?
So at the time that document was executed, the understanding between the companies was that we would enter into an operating agreement that would set all of that out. So what that agreement specifically says is that this is in anticipation of a Section 214 transfer and the execution of an operating agreement, and that if those things don't happen, that we will establish a rate.
Okay, so right now, the memorandum of understanding doesn't have a rate. Does the agreement with U.S. Cellular have a rate?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Can you tell me when you entered into each of those, the agreement and the memorandum of understanding?
The memorandum of understanding was in 2022,
Okay.
late 2022. The U.S. Cellular agreement was this year.
Okay.
And the reason it was this year instead of 2022 is because ETC2 has an agreement with U.S. Cellular, and we were anticipating being able to, when they took over operations, being able to utilize their agreement. And because of the delay, this is one of the things, you asked me what I would have done differently. I would have signed the U.S. Cellular Agreement back in '22 if I had understood that this operating agreement through ETC2 was not going to happen.
Okay.
As quickly as I thought. But we didn't want to sign it back then because it would have been duplicative. It would have put an extra burden on the second company if they had the agreement and we had the agreement. That's more expense for them. But
Okay,
no way
thank
around
you.
that at this point.
So is there an expiration date on that agreement with US Cellular, or?
5 years.
5 years? Okay, so that would be.
But it's renewable. I don't think it's really, doesn't really expire.
Just for the sake of, there is a term to the agreement.
Yes.
Okay.
With extensions that would enable us to utilize it through the entire term of our CAF2 award, which I think is another 6 years.
Okay, thank you.
Five years.
So the memorandum of understanding does not have, I would imagine, since you said you intended that to move into the full operating agreement, there's not really a term on that one?
There's no term on it.
Okay. If by chance, the other company, ETC number 2, would decide to terminate that, can Aristotle still provide service to the locations?
Yes.
Okay, and how does it do that?
The way that agreement is structured is that if the operating agreement doesn't go through and the transfer doesn't happen, they will set a rate for subleasing their spectrum and continue to lease it to us. It would turn into a spectrum sublease rather than an operating agreement. But the way that document is written would enable us to continue to utilize their spectrum.
Okay, and then you would enter into some sort of purchase agreement, some sort of rate or that for the agreement at that time. You mentioned that ETC number 2 could potentially do installations for customers for
Yes.
Aristotle. Has there been any sort of rate established for that type of a service, or?
Not at this time, and again, that would be established in the operating agreement, but we have had recent conversations with them where I stated that it was necessary to have an understanding of what they would charge if an installation occurred. The only county that they would do that for in the absence of an operating agreement would be probably Howell County, because that's the one they're closest located to. Although I have not discussed that with them in detail. They will be setting a rate if we need them between now and the execution of the operating agreement.
Okay. So out of curiosity, if for some reason the transfer agreement did not go through, Aristotle still intends to build a network in Missouri?
All things being equal, the answer is yes. If we are not an ETC in this state, then I do not know how to answer that question.
To be clear, did the staff of the commission seek to revoke the ETC status of Aristotle?
Not yet, but they have said they were going to look at it.
Okay, but currently Aristotle is an ETC.
It is our intention to continue to operate in this state.
Okay, thank you.
It is our intention to finish the CAF build in this state. That has been derailed by the fact that we were not recertified in October.
Okay, thank you. Is there a date certain by which Aristotle will either enter into a transfer agreement with the other company, or will decide that negotiations have gone on long enough and move forward with building a network in Missouri?
Our date would be by the end of the first quarter of next year. We do not control the other company and do not have any, I presume something could occur with them that they could explain to us that would make us change that date. But as of right now, we are proceeding as if none of this will be going forward.
Okay, thank you. And finally, I just want to get a clarification that you commented that companies miss milestones for the CAF2 auction all the time. Can you tell me your personal knowledge of companies missing milestones?
Sure. So there was a company in Oklahoma that certified exactly 40%, and the USAC deemed ineligible some number of their locations, and which caused them to have funds withheld for a couple of months while they rectified it. It's usually that. It's less common for a company, to abysmally default on it. But usually it's because USAC will inevitably eliminate a certain number of locations as being invalid through whatever process they use. And let me explain why that might be the case just super briefly. If there is a barn, it might look like a house. And if the company certifies the barn and USAC realizes it's a barn and not a house, that location will be eliminated. And so it does happen, I shouldn't say all the time, but it happens regularly that enough locations will be decertified by USAC that the company would have missed a milestone.
Okay, thank you. I think that clarifies. And then finally, you mentioned that you tried to talk to staff, tried to explain to staff. I just want to clarify, we did have conversations prior to this case.
Yes.
Did you ever feel like you were cut off in one of those conversations?
I did not feel that we were cut off, no. I felt that we were not heard.
Okay.
And that there was a preconceived notion at play, and that really not much we said made a difference to what staff had already concluded was the case. That's my personal feeling.
The company had the opportunity to make filings in this docket at any time, correct?
We did make filings in the docket, yeah.
And staff, did staff ever give you the impression that we would not be open to a phone call or a meeting to further discuss anything?
No.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Scurlock, thank you. This looks to be a good time to take a break. We've been going for about a couple hours or so. I show that it's about 5 till 11. Let's go off the record until 10 after 11. Anything further from council or bench before we take a recess? All right, hearing nothing, we will be in recess until 11:10. Thank you. We are off the record. Very good. We are back on the record. Ms. Bowles, you are still under oath. I believe we will have some bench questions for you. Commissioner Holzman, any questions for this witness? Don't hear anything. Commissioner Kolkmeyer, if you're there, any questions for this witness?
No, not at this time. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Hahn,
Thank you, Judge. I do have questions.
when you're ready.
Good morning.
Morning.
I want to try to clarify this more for myself than anything, so help me understand it better. I really want to try to understand your milestones and customer connections. So my understanding is that you provide the Spectrum service and you passed the test where the staff came to assess whether or not you are providing service, but you don't have any customers currently receiving that service. Are you required by this CAF Phase 2 to have Missouri customers to receive the funds?
No.
In other states in which you have received CAF 2 funds, do you have customers?
In some of them we do, and in some of them we do not.
And in the states in which you do not, are you certified as a ETC from their commissions?
Yes.
When under the CAF 2 program requirements, you're only required to provide the service generally. Or what is the requirement? Help me understand that.
We're required to provide or to make available the service at a specific speed to a specific location. So if that location was one of the 788 locations given to us by the FCC, we've committed to be able to deliver speeds of at least 25 megs down, 3 megs up to that location through a fixed wireless service.
Okay, that's helpful. In states where you also provide the fixed wireless service and have customers, about how many customers how many customers do you have that are not email customers but are fixed wireless internet customers?
Fixed wireless internet customers in Arkansas around 1,700.
Okay.
I think in Illinois it's 125. And then we have a couple in Mississippi and none in Oklahoma.
Okay. In other states in which you don't have customers, do you contract with another ETC to provide the fixed wireless service to customers directly, or how does that work?
Only in Illinois.
Only in Illinois?
Yeah.
Okay. If we, as a commission, certify you and you fail to meet the milestones as set out in the CAF 2 auction by 2025, what happens?
So the USAC would make that determination, and then they would basically issue a warning and reduce the amount of funds we receive and give us 6 months to fix it. If after 6 months we didn't fix it, they put it into something, I think it's called a Tier 3 or Schedule 3. I have it actually here, but it's a specific designation, which basically means you are not meeting milestones, and then there's another 6 months to fix it. And if at the end of the year we've met the milestone, whichever one was missed, they will go back and give us all of the funds that were held back.
If you were to never meet the milestones, say at the end of 25, you go through the year of compliance with USAC, you still don't meet them, then what happens? Is there ever a time where the FCC requires you to repay the funds?
The FCC requires us to maintain a standby letter of credit. And if the milestones are, and that letter of credit goes up or down depending on how much of the, so let's say that we get through the 80% milestone but we never hit the 100% milestone, then the FCC can call a portion of that letter of credit, and that reimburses the FCC for whatever percentage of money. And presumably, they would also stop future funds, because one thing to remember is it's a 10-year program with a 6-year build. So we have 6 years to build it, and then there's 4 years of maintenance. So presumably, if that milestone was never met, the 4 years of maintenance would be cut off, which would be, in this case, $1.2 million. And then they could, but don't have to, call the letter of credit. And I think what they do would depend on how egregious it was. Having already made the 40% milestone will make the 60% milestone. It's very rare for them. They claw back money when there is a default before any deployment has begun.
Okay, so ultimately, the FCC is responsible for ensuring that you're meeting the milestones with the funds provided.
Correct.
Okay. Have you ever been decertified in any other state in which you're operating? I just want to clarify.
No.
Okay. Staff does allege that you are not advertising as required as part of receiving those funds. Are there timelines and milestones you have to meet for advertising, or can you explain that?
No, there are no timelines or milestones for advertising, and there are no requirements for what has to be done in terms of advertising. I mean, there's no prescription on, you have to run 5 TV ads and a newspaper article. It's very much, you just have to show as a company that you have made consumers aware of the service, is really what the FCC means by advertising. They're not prescribing a specific methodology for advertising or even amount.
Okay. You mentioned that you have a lease with one sublease from one provider, U.S. Cellular by name. You have another provider that you're working with to effectuate the operating agreement and the transfer agreement. You had mentioned that this proceeding is giving them pause on effectuating the operating and transfer agreement. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So far, they have not indicated that they won't go forward, but they ask us regularly. We have a weekly meeting with them, and they ask us at every weekly meeting, how do you feel about this? Do you think that your certification will be renewed? Do you think that this is going to be a problem? And they are, and I don't actually know if we are not certified and that money gets removed. I don't personally know that when the transfer happens 6 months from now, that they get that money. Like, I don't know whether that money is lost forever or if it goes into a holding bucket for Missouri pending the transfer. But I know that as far as the late certification, we're losing money every day, and that money will not be able to go to them either. And so depending on how long this dragged out, I could see them looking at that and saying, well, it was, worth X million dollars, this award, but now it's not worth that much, and so we need to change our consideration. I don't know. I just know that they are very closely watching what's happening with this hearing. I mean, with this proceeding, not this hearing, but.
You mentioned your counsel asked you a question, and it was in our agenda meeting about whenever we considered, the commission considered in our public agenda meeting, the order that provided the list of providers to the FCC for certification, and Aristotle was not in the list. My impression at the time was that there was a failure to file reports, which is something I believe that I haven't rewatched the proceeding, something the chair had, was also my impression. Can you talk about that a little bit more? How had there been other requests that you'd failed to meet? Have you talk about that for me?
No, not at all. We have never failed to file a report. And in fact, I did not watch the hearing live, but our counsel did, and he said, he had originally said that there was a line item and that the case number was our case number. And I said, well, but we have an opportunity to respond. And he said, yes, it's due on September 27th. And so he listened to the hearing, and after the hearing, he called me and said, they're certifying, they didn't name any companies, but they're certifying a certain, I think 64, and there's one company that they're not certifying because of failure to file reports. And our compliance officer was on the phone, and she said, oh, well, that's not us then, because we've filed reports. And so I assumed that there was, our brief would go in and there would be a hearing and we would go through this process. And so we went ahead and filed our response in a timely manner. And I subsequently watched the hearing, and I actually watched it again right before this hearing, to make sure that I had remembered correctly. And that is what was represented, was that the ETC being left off the report, left off the certification, was because of failure to file reports.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Just checking my notes really quick. So as part of this hearing, really what's at the commission's discretion is the certification and the CFR to go along with that. So I want to go through the components briefly of the certification rule. And so bear with me. There's, in my view, three primary components. One is that your company must file an annual certification with the administrator and the FCC. Have you done that?
Yes.
And does that certification say that the funds that you used in the preceding year, I'm assuming 2023, I'm not exactly sure, and will be used in the upcoming year, 2024, were only for the provision, maintenance, and upgrading of facilities and services for which the support is intended?
Yes, I do think it's 22 and 23,
Okay.
but yes.
Can you talk about how you, with your providing the service but not having customers, meets that definition of provision, maintenance, and upgrading of facilities and services?
It meets that well, it's hard for us without customers to obviously maintain a customer base, but it meets that definition by, one, we're able to deliver the service, so that is provision. We do provide the service. We provide customer support, and we provide technical support, and we do network mapping and other things to ensure that the service is available. And once we have deployments in Missouri, whether it is a tower or a customer, we would then be responsible for maintaining that customer and billing and making sure that they were covered. It's just not very many locations.
Okay. I want to come back to that. The third component of certification is that the state has to file the certification.
Yes.
Okay. So one component you've already done. The third component we have not done. And the middle component is really what's at question here, whether you're providing, maintaining, upgrading those services as intended. So I want to go back to, if you don't have customers, and it's not your intention to have customers, the transfer agreement is in the operating and transfer agreement. Are you going to ask the company that's potentially engaging this with you to have Missouri customers?
So let me go back to that, the provision, maintenance, and what was the third?
Upgrading.
Upgrading. So that's not an and in every year.
Okay.
So this year we are providing the service. In subsequent years, after the build is complete in year 6, there is a responsibility to maintain and upgrade, and that's why the money continues after the build is complete for another 4 years. So that's not every single year you have to be providing, maintaining, and upgrading. That's, you have to be doing one of those 3 things, because providing throughout and then maintaining, and if there is an upgrade pathway, upgrading. So we are meeting that requirement in that terms. Insofar as not wanting customers in Missouri, we do want customers in Missouri. If we believed that it was in the best interest of Missouri consumers for us to operate in this state and to onboard customers, that's what we would be doing. The network that we won through CAF overlaps ETC2's network. And so they are going to be deploying in those areas. And that is a duplication of effort, and it is a duplication of, it takes funds from one, it isn't an efficient use of funds for both of us to be deploying in the same area when there are so many unserved in those 3 counties. That is the basis for why we entered into the transfer agreement. If the transfer agreement never happens, we fully intend to operate in this state. This is not a, we don't want to work in Missouri and we don't want Missouri customers. This is a, given that it was 788 locations and this company already has thousands of customers in Missouri, it made a lot of sense. And as I said, they approached us. So it was not something that we, went into this idea, we're going to just not have Missouri customers.
I appreciate the clarification on it's not an and every year, provision, maintenance, and upgrading, because that might actually, the first year you're awarded funds, you might not actually be able to provide that year. So that's a distinction with a difference. So thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Commissioner, thank you. Let me see if we have any cross based on bench questions. Ms. Gerlach, any questions?
Just one, Your Honor. The commissioner asked you several questions kind of about how you're meeting the elements of 54.314. What was the purpose of the CAF 2 auction? What did the FCC convey was the intention of the auction?
To provide service to unserved locations in rural communities throughout the United States.
And by unserved, that means a lack of broadband service?
Yes, no broadband, no internet service of greater than 10 megs.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
I do. Sorry.
Commissioner, I think she has more questions. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Further questions. The CAF 2 auction, it is not just for unserved, it is also for underserved. Is that correct?
Yes, so unserved would be no, so at the time, it's 2018, unserved would have been no internet at all, and underserved would have been internet at speeds of less than 10 megs. So it would have been both of those things.
Correct. Okay, so it's not just unserved, it is unserved and underserved.
Correct. I
Okay.
apologize, that's right.
And the requirements for speeds of underserved are 10.1, and you receive funding for unserved and underserved so that they can get speeds of at least 25.3.
Correct.
And that 25.3 is the FCC's definition of broadband service currently. Is that correct, or is it 10.1?
It is 25.3 currently.
25.3. Okay.
Yeah.
And the new standards for broadband service provision under the new bipartisan infrastructure law, or
BEAD.
IIJA, I can't remember which one because they run together.
Yeah.
What's the definition that they're requiring for broadband service in that case?
For a location to be considered served, it has to have 100 by 20. 100 down.
120. Yeah, okay, thank you. And so earlier you'd mentioned, I think the staff council asked you, is there service in these areas? And you had responded that there is satellite service. Can you speak to the speeds of satellite service? Is there a way to measure it comparable to broadband so we can kind of have some idea of?
Yes, so there's 2 pieces to it. For an area to be served, one is the speed, and the other is the latency. And the latency has to be less than 100 milliseconds. So insofar as speed is concerned, a lot of times with satellite, the download speed may be 50 megs, but oftentimes it's closer to 5 megs. The problem with satellite is the upload speed generally never goes above 2 megs because it's just the devices on the home are not strong enough to send a signal back to space, which is part of the problem. The bigger problem with latency and why it's not broadband is because of the latency. When you send a signal from Earth to space and back, it introduces delay. So as the satellite industry will say, 90% of what you want to do on the internet, you can do with the satellite connection, but what's in the 10% is voice over IP telephony, streaming video, high definition video, video conferencing. And so satellite is, and plus with the data caps, when you layer data caps on there, that is why the FCC does not consider satellite to be broadband, is the high latency, low upload speeds, sometimes low download speeds, and data caps.
Thank you, appreciate the clarification.
Commissioner, thank you. Any further cross based on bench questions, Ms. Scarlett?
No further questions. Thank you, Judge.
Mr. Lumley, any redirect based on bench questions?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. May this witness be excused. All right, thank you. Ms. Bowles, thank you. You may step down. And I think the bench may have additional questions for Mr. Van Eschen. And Mr. Van Eschen, you're still under oath. If you'll retake the stand, please. Right, and Commissioner, when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Van Eschen. I'm just going to ask some more general questions about telecommunications and broadband funding and this type of work generally. So are you aware of maybe how many companies receive this type of funding in Missouri?
I don't have the number in front of me, but there's approximately about 65 that receive funding from the high-cost program.
Okay. Did staff do 65 investigations?
Not to this extent. What we do is we look at the annual filings that companies submit, and we also require companies to maintain information about their companies, and we maintain it on what we refer to as a information sheet, and that sheet provides information about how much funding they're getting, what kind of high-cost support, if there's any broadband deployment obligations, what those are, the timeline for that, how they're using the funding, what their future plans are. We keep a lot of other information about the company, history, where they're headquartered, call centers, and so forth. We do that for all the companies.
Okay. How long would you say have you been keeping those types of reports?
I'd say 4 years, 3 or 4 years.
So relatively recently?
We've maintained them for several years, yes.
Okay. Was the CAF2 reverse auction the first time you kept those reports, or were there times before that?
There are times before that.
Okay. If the company had received federal funds or other funds, or what was the distinction?
It's solely federal funding from the Federal Universal Service Fund's high-cost program.
Thank you. Has the staff ever recommended not recertifying a carrier for this reason?
There have been some companies that have ETC status and don't receive funding. They haven't submitted anything to us. They don't respond, and they're not recertified.
So kind of defunct? If the company is non-responsive but they don't receive funds?
Yeah, and there was another incident in approximately 20 years ago where a couple of companies were not recertified. And those reasons were not using the funding appropriately, and there was some criminal activity associated with that.
Okay, so generally, I would say that based on your testimony, this is rare for a telecommunications
it
company
is.
to
It
not get
is.
recertified.
It is.
But also the carrier that you mentioned 20 years ago, what funds were they not using appropriately? I can't imagine 20 years ago they were using for CAF2 funds for broadband. Maybe they were, I don't know.
That was a very unusual case. And there were legal implications for the company officials. And they were basically funneling the money in an inappropriate way. And it was through the FBI that the company was using the funds in a totally inappropriate manner. And some of the officials did spend time in jail as a result.
Were they decertified after an investigation, after an audit from the FCC? I'm trying to figure out at what phase in the process they were not certified.
There was an investigation with the commission, and I'd say as a result of that investigation, they were not recertified.
Was there also an audit?
Yeah, our accounting staff was also involved.
Was there an FCC audit?
I do not recall the FCC's involvement in that.
Okay. Seems like a slightly different set of scenarios.
Perhaps. I think it gets, it boils down to, I think what we look at is this funding is to be used to benefit the consumers that are targeted by the funding, and whether the company is using the funds in a way that directly benefits those consumers.
Okay. I'm going to switch gears on you really quick. I asked the company's witness if there's a requirement for the company to have customers in order to meet the CAF2 grant criteria. And she responded that the answer is no. Is that your understanding as well?
Yeah, they just have to make broadband service available. And technically, it's expected that the company would use their own facilities or use their facilities in combination with resale of another company's facilities. But they just have to make it available.
Okay. I also asked about advertising based upon your position that they had not been advertising, and that's a requirement of the funding award. Her testimony was that there's no specific milestones or criteria for advertising, and that they are currently advertising. Do you agree with that testimony?
I would say they are not advertising. I will agree that the criteria for determining what is appropriate advertising is really not clearly defined. I think the FCC rule that requires all ETCs to advertise is the expectation that the company would use advertising using media of general distribution. But I really haven't seen the company put forth any advertising. And it was very unusual, at least to us, that when we look at their website, it wouldn't even reflect that service was available in Missouri months afterwards.
from your knowledge of how the funding works, and there's not a lot of criteria around advertising, if they were to increase their advertising efforts significantly, maybe after they get a transfer agreement or operating agreement in place, would that satisfy staff's contention that they're not advertising? If they started advertising to customers?
Yeah, I think they definitely need to step up their efforts to advertise in order to meet the requirement that all ETCs must advertise.
Thank you. I'm going to change gears again. I'm going to go to certification. So I'd ask the company's witness about the rule on certification. And I kind of walk through, at least in my mind, I've compartmentalized it into 3 buckets. And the first bucket was that under the rule that the company is required to file an annual certification with the FCC. Is it your knowledge and understanding that they have filed a document with the administrator in FCC?
Yes, they have.
And I think the second part of the certification is really what's at issue here, which is that the carriers within the state have in the past year and in the upcoming year use that funding only for the provision, maintenance, and upgrading of facilities and service for which the support is intended. The witness talked about how they're providing the service even though they don't have customers, and she talked about the distinction between maintenance and upgrading of those facilities and service, though maybe not all at the same time or the same years. Do you agree with her testimony that they're providing, maintaining, upgrading those facilities, maybe not in the same year?
The rule that, the FCC rule that I think you're citing.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't give the number. I can give that to you if you want, but.
Well, and basically, that rule is, asking states to certify that the company is using the funding for providing, maintaining, and so forth as intended by that funding. And again, for me, and I think it's, the funding is intended to benefit the consumers that are targeted by the funding. And in this instance, I don't see anything that the company has done so far that benefits the consumers in Missouri.
Understood. The third part of that rule is basically that the state has to file the certification. So that part would not rest on them, that would rest on us.
That is correct.
Okay. Can't think of any more, Mr. Van Eschen. Thank you.
Commissioner, thank you. Let me see if we have any more bench questions. Commissioner Holzman, any questions for Mr. Van Eschen?
No, thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Commissioner Kolkmeyer.
No, thank you, Judge.
All right, thank you. Do you have any questions from council based on bench questions? Cross based on those questions, Mr. Lumley?
No, sir.
Thank you. Any redirect based on bench questions, Ms. Scurlock?
Just a few. Mr. Van Eschen, the commissioner was asking you about the other company that you were referencing that staff did not recommend recertification for. Do you recall why that company was receiving government funding?
You mean this year?
No, the company that we did not recertify 20 years ago.
Yeah, there were a couple of companies, they were related. But you're asking about the reason?
The funding, why, what program was that under?
That was under the high-cost program.
Just the traditional high-cost program, and that's to provide telecommunication services to unserved or underserved areas?
in high-cost areas.
In high-cost areas, okay. The commissioner also asked you about the staff's investigation and specifically looking into Aristotle. You stated that staff does observe all of the companies receiving funding under CAF 2 and other federal programs in the state of Missouri?
Yes, all the companies that receive federal USF high-cost support, we look at.
Okay. And I realize I've been using high cost, but that's areas that it would cost more than what might be considered average to provide service?
Yes, it's specifically for high-cost areas that are lack broadband that meets the 10.1 megabit speed.
And that's the current definition. Historically, high cost was for telecommunication services as well, correct?
Yes, it was for telecom service, and when the FCC came out with their national broadband plan, they expanded the fund to provide funding for broadband. And over the years, the high-cost program has primarily been a program that supports broadband service.
Thank you. And then back to staff's investigation. Did staff observe Aristotle prior to asking to open the investigative docket that we are currently here today because of, was staff investigating Aristotle prior to the opening of this docket?
We had flagged the company, like we do other companies, that we feel what we had observed, at least for Aristotle, is no broadband deployments were made since they started to receive funding, and they were basically within a year of meeting the first milestone, where they would need to meet the milestone of deploying to 40% of the locations. And so we were watching them, as well as some other companies that met that criteria.
And that's the reason why staff opened an investigative docket for Aristotle?
I think we opened the investigation of Aristotle because based on the information that we had gathered and how they presented their ETC application to the commission, is that they would build their own network in Missouri. And when we started asking some questions about, well, how did you deploy broadband service to these locations, we were unable to get an answer. That, coupled with the fact that we thought it was very unusual that the company didn't indicate on their website that service was available in Missouri. And that is somewhat unique. But through those factors, we decided, hey, we need to take a closer look.
And finally, the commissioner asked you about whether there is a need to have customers pursuant to the requirements of the CAF 2 program. Is it your understanding that the intent of the program would be that customers would be served by the provision of broadband services?
A company doesn't need to necessarily have broadband subscribers. This funding is designed to benefit those consumers and at least make the service available to them, so that if they want to subscribe to it, they have that ability.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Ms. Gerlach, thank you. Mr. Van Eschen, more questions? Quite all right, when you're ready.
I think the question that staff council just asked had, talked about the intent of the program, the intent of the Universal Service Fund CAF program. And if the company were to better make available the service directly to customers now on their website so that customers could sign up directly and they could start enrolling customers here. And then if they effectuated the operating and transfer agreement, they could just transfer those assets to the new company. Would that generally try to satisfy staff's contention about the customer aspect?
I think that's a step in the right direction, although, it gets back to, certification and is the company using the funding appropriately? And, I think the commission needs to take a look at, are the consumers that are targeted by this funding, are they benefiting from it?
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner, thank you. Any cross based on those bench questions? Mr. Lumley?
No, sir.
Redirect based on bench?
No, thank you, Judge.
Thank you. There's nothing further. All right, Mr. Van Eschen, thank you very much. And I believe those are all the witnesses we have scheduled.
Judge, could I ask
Mr.
that
Lumley.
Ms. Bowles return to just address that one point that Commissioner Hahn was asking about?
If there's no objection. Okay,
I
I'm sorry.
would object. I think that Ms. Bowles had an opportunity on the stand to answer Commissioner questions, but I don't want to deny Commissioner Hahn if she would like to put her back on the stand.
This is to the question about the ability of customers today to sign up.
Okay, I'll let her retake the stand. Ms. Bowles, you're still under oath. And Mr. Lumley, when you're ready.
Thank you, Judge. Could you just address the Commissioner's question about the current ability of customers to sign up for service?
Yes, customers have been able to sign up for service on our website since earlier this year. And they do so by going to the website and filling out an online form, which goes directly to our customer support. That's how we have 151 leads in Missouri, is they are coming primarily through the website. So that's already in place.
But to clarify, those leads, none of them have been in the
No.
specific census blocks.
No.
That's all I have, unless the Commissioner has follow-up.
Mr. Lumley, thank you. Let me see if we have any bench questions. Commissioner Holzman, any questions?
No, thank you, Judge.
Thank you. Commissioner Kolkmeyer? Commissioner Hahn, any questions? No, all right, thank you. All right, Ms. Bowles, thank you. All right, I believe we may have reached the end of the evidence, but is there anything further from council before we conclude the hearing?
Were we going to have closing arguments? I would like a brief closing argument.
I'll be happy to read your briefs.
Well, that's the point, though, is that the briefs are going to add another month to this loss of funds. Well, let me just say, I would ask the commission to consider directing staff to prepare a letter that the commission could look at its next agenda session.
I mean, you're free to file, if you want some sort of relief, I mean, you're free to file some sort of request on this docket, and staff can respond, and we'll go from there. And again, I'll look forward to the briefs, but I don't intend to hear closing.
Thank you, Judge.
Anything further from council or from the bench before we conclude the hearing? All right, hearing nothing, that will conclude today's evidentiary hearing and file number TO 2023-0436. Thank you very much. We are off the record.